Hello, welcome to another video, and I've got my sensei. I don't know. Like when I started Blue Seal, it was like I jumped from Red Purple in like set two, and I just basically watched you, and I think like a little bit of Moyen as well, and I just like for hours until I could get into the deck. So very grateful for that, and I always respect your opinion above a lot of other players. And we're gonna talk about like no wheel Blue Steel because I just feel you're quite educated on it. You're like the goat on it. You got it to how far did you get it to in the regional?
Top 16 in Chicago.
Top
So,
16. Yeah, very nice, very
with
nice.
no wheels.
So we're just gonna go through it. So actually, I just first mention like, what do you think the benefits are really of playing this version over a one that includes Wheel, which everyone knows is a whole new world, is what I mean when I say that.
Yep. So last set was like the first set that I kind of went hard into no wheel. The main reason is green is pretty big, so they have Ursula to rip wheel. Also, red blue is much stronger last set, and there's a lot of games where even if you hit fishbone quill and you hit heavy ramp, you still didn't want to wheel. Just give them all those resources. Sometimes they'd hit one jump and they could play a fishbone quill because they'd anticipate you're trying to wheel. So they just pitch their whole hand, and it's like, well, if I give them a free full 7 cards, I'm probably not winning this game, or it's probably going to be a huge struggle to do that. So I was like, well, those are the two main concerns this set. And if I don't want to wheel against either of those, why am I even playing this card that's an uninkable card? So that was kind of the idea. And in practice, we got 4 more popsicles kind of with the Fortisphere. So it was like, well, if we just hit Flavershim, maybe it lives one turn. That's probably enough card economy to be able to play this. So
Mm.
that's kind of why I decided to play it last set. Um, Going into this set, it's kind of the same thing. Red Blue's stronger than ever. Like you still don't want to give them a free refill. They still don't have the 8 popsicles like you do, so sometimes they can kind of whiff on the card economy. You can just say, well, if I'm not giving you 7 free cards, you might just run out of threats. Um, so that's kind of the idea going into it. We lost green steel, so we don't have to worry about Ursula quite as much, but um, Steel Song is obviously very popular.
Mm.
Some people are playing 2 or more copies of Bare Necessities, so that's just -1 target for that. Yeah, so we still don't really want to be playing wheel even against like red purple last set and this set. If they go first, sometimes if they curve out, it still feels very bad to take a turn to sing a whole new world, give them a free refill, and then also have one of your characters exerted, especially if it's something like Cogsworth that can just maybe just get hit for free and they don't even lose a trade. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll admit when I talk to people about playing Blue Steel and they ask for tips, there's so many times where it's you don't want to wheel here, to the point where I think there's more times where you say I don't want to wheel here than there are times when you say I want to. And as you say, even in Red Purple, you can have those games on the play where you set up the 5 cost wheel and just go over them, but on the draw, you sometimes don't want to really do that because they're going to just starve their hand out anyway, trying to aggro you for the law, however they're going to play it. So yeah, there's just loads of negatives to it. But I will mention then, so as you take a whole new world out of the deck. You mentioned about we've got 8 more popsicles, so filtering's pretty good. Hirum's pretty. You're probably going to hit a Hiram if you filter through 8 popsicles. But yeah, taking that 7 fresh card like draw out of the deck. How do you feel the deck sort of draws and keeps going? Does it feel fine?
Yeah, I think so. You really want a hard mulligan for Flavisham. Flavisham is like the number 1 target. Obviously, you want a popsicle, which is pretty easy with 8 of them, a 2 drop, and then Flavisham and ramp. And we play 8 of everything except a Flavisham. So your goal is to maybe hit one Flavisham throughout the game, even if it doesn't live and it gets like brawled right away. Sometimes you're fine with just those extra 2 cards. But we also like can build our deck differently because we're not playing a whole new world. So I play a lot heavier, like kind of top end, I guess, and that's just because we want all of our top decks to be like solid late game and like cards. Um, no Wheel is much more of like a mid range than a hyper ramp, kind of combo-y style deck.
Mm.
We're much more about just playing one good character per turn. Sometimes in 7, 8 ink, you'll have double spells with Flaversham or something like that, and plus a 2 drop. But for the most part, we want like just one solid card per turn that's proactive and does what we want to do. So sometimes you'll just go like 2 drop, play a Mickey, play a Cogsworth or a Beast, Tinkerbell. Then we have stuff like Simba and Hades at 7, and then of course Tamatoa. So we kind of have solid things all the way up on the curve if we just want to be playing a character per turn, which is a lot of games, especially going second. When you have that extra card from the mulligan, sometimes you don't really have to prioritize heavy card draw. You just go straight for the play a character that's good each turn and hope that it combats their tempo. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been flashing the list up on the screen. I'll just peep it over now. So yeah, you have got a lot more top end. Like I say, you've got four Tamatoas, which sort of you see that die down and wheel lists mainly for room. And yeah, you've just got so much in the top end. But we'll go for each card. So yeah, you mentioned you want to keep the top end quite heavy. Simba's pretty good. It's just a good card. It's a 5/7. I think most lists will sort of struggle at dealing with that.
yeah,
Besides, I guess, World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Yeah.
yep. Just I was just about to interject about that. So last set Simba was a little bit risky because Steel Song played like 2 to 3 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind,
Hmm.
but for some reason people have not been playing that yet, and I actually think that will change. So hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully we can get away with Simba because if you stick a Simba against Steel Song, it's one of the best things you can do. But yeah, if people start playing World's Greatest Criminal Mind, I might have to try some other stuff out, like maybe Arthur. We'll see.
How about Mufasa? Is that taking your? I haven't seen that appear in any of
Mufasa.
your lists. No.
Everybody asks about the new Mufasa. So what I've said when people ask me about this is I think like 75 to 80% of the time that you want to drop a Mufasa, a Tamatoa will just be better.
Mm,
Um, like Tamatoa, the thing about Mufasa is that like he might just die right away. The cards you've inked maybe aren't the best. Tamatoa has the option of getting back a dime from the discard. There's a lot of stuff, and the main thing is just he's inkable. So like having something that's 8 cost that's uninkable is like pretty bad in a deck like this
mm,
because we play stuff like 3 Hades, 2 Lucky Dime. If you get stuck with 2 cards like that usually and you don't have Fishbone Quill, it might be like pretty tough to curve out and not have like to give up a turn of what you want to do just because of your uninkable count in your hand. So
yeah.
it has to really be like a step above what a Tamatoa would be to warrant like the uninkable part of it, pretty
Yeah.
much.
I mean, the argument's usually that it's one attack less a World's Greatest Criminal Mind doesn't hit it, but I've had games where they'll just Queen Quest buff it and then take out
Oh
that,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Or they'll just find
the
an answer.
classic,
So
yeah.
you're just playing a big character at that point, and as you say, the
That is
uninkable.
that is a good point though. I guess if people do start playing World's Greatest Criminal Minds, Mufasa doesn't get hit by it, so
Yeah,
maybe throw
yeah.
one in. We'll see.
Going through the rest of the list as well, the Kronk card, which you've tweeted about and you seem to
Wrong,
really
yeah.
like. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'll admit he's made it into my list as well. I liked trying it. I think Jonathan Lamb took it as well. Took one copy to the top eight. So, I mean, talk us through that choice. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, so actually, one of my playtest partners put me on the Kronk. We were just like searching. We are like, okay, Steel Song is probably the number 1 deck this set. Like, what can we put in that helps a little bit with that? And of course, like one of the biggest weaknesses is Tinkerbell's a great card versus Steel Song, but it just can get Zeus right away,
Mm,
which is awful if you don't have time to establish a Cogsworth first to protect it. So he found Kronk. He's like, oh, it's just this Tinkerbell. You don't get the ETB that deals 1 damage, but you get a resist +1, so it lives against the Zeus. So we're like, okay, well, we'll try this against Steel Song. Maybe this is like just a nice answer we can add in. And it turns out it was. It was like very good. Like some games, you just play Quill, play Kronk on 4 if you go second, and like it slows them down a lot. Even if they're just singing songs, like it's just gonna kill potentially 2 things right away.
mm,
And it's also something that will a singer that will probably stick to threaten the swords if they don't exert anything. So yeah, that's probably like honestly the biggest addition this set, and it's a card that I think is maybe set 2 or even set 1. So I think it's kind of funny how you kind of dig up these cards that have never seen play from previous sets just because of the meta shifts a certain way. But
mm.
you can't count things out forever. Also, we were talking about earlier, Razul, like that's another one that's like old that we were digging out, kind of for the same reason. Like Steel Song, it just hits the right numbers. Threatening to hit 3 is super important for stuff like Ariel. So yeah,
Mm.
those 2 cards are like the newest additions, and they're not from the newest set, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, looking through the list, you've only got two cards from the new set, which is the Donald and the Kuzco. But you mentioned the Razul, so I've got a couple of things to talk about. But you mentioned the Razul, yeah, talk about that one. I mean, that is a card that most people had forgotten about. I think I'd seen it in some Amber Steel aggro lists about it, really. Um, yeah, about that
Yeah,
choice.
so before like the 2 drop slot, of course, Smee is probably the best 2 drop, and we always play for that. But the other 2 drops have kind of come in and out based on the meta. So like last set, there was like a lot of green, so I opted for Magic Broom,
Mm.
or whatever the flying broom one is. But it's a 2/3. So it stops Flynn. That's like the main criteria right now because red purple is still a thing with Flynn. You have to stop Flynn on two. But then it also threatened for Diablo. Well, now green steel isn't a huge deck, so like we don't super have to worry about Diablo too much. So I was like, there's got to be something better that can hit like slightly better numbers. And turns out like Razul is kind of that.
Mm.
Like hitting three is like super important. Even if it takes damage, you have popsicles that can threaten to heal it and hit for three again next turn. He's also a captain, so it turns off this Mr. Smee ping, which doesn't come up super often, but it actually does sometimes. Sometimes you'll go a curve where you'll go like, say you're going second, you go Mr. Smee on two, Fishbone Quill on three, and then on four you play Flaversham plus a Razul, and you
Mm.
can quest and it doesn't take the ping damage, or hit something with two attack and it lives and doesn't take the ping. So it does come up like somewhat often, and it's not something to be just completely discounted. But yeah, I think just slightly above stats from what Magic Broom is, and the evasive's kind of pointless now. So
Yeah.
just throw him in, and well, I think it'll, if as long as the meta doesn't change, it's probably the best two drop other than Smee.
Yeah, I mean it is interesting because in the Amber Steel list they've got the Piglet card that is also a captain, and as you say, like
Yeah,
you don't put it in the deck because it's a captain, you put it in because it's a good card. But then you have those moments where it's like, oh, that was really useful that he was a captain there because they can't now
yeah,
let the Storm Rage on ping or whatever in the mirror. Yeah. But yeah, just a couple more bits about. You've got the 5 drop slot. We've got 3 5 drops in this list, which usually tends to be you have your Cogsworth and then you pick like a Tragic Beast or a Hardhead or whatever you wanted in standard Blue Steel list. But this one you've got 2 Donalds and 2 Beasts. I assume Beasts are quite necessary in this just for a sense of card draw aspect, and the Donald seems just very important as well.
yeah. So last said, a lot of people kind of were like, "Oh man, Beast just dies everything pretty much every deck that you're playing against. It
Mm,
feels awful. There's like Medusa, Zeus. Just it seems so fragile, and that's true. But red purple is like a very important matchup. I mean, I think it will still be going into set five. So, um, going first in that matchup, going something like two drop Mickey plus Beast is like fantastic. It's guaranteed like 2 cards pretty much, unless they run some janky stuff like Pinocchio or something.
mm,
Because it's going to be 2 turns before they can play Medusa. So if you miss Flaversham, Beast is like what you want to be doing against that deck. Sometimes going second, it's not the best. It'll still draw you 1 card, but um, it's kind of like that just extra. If you miss Flaversham, we have 2 other ways to potentially draw cards. And sometimes you do have to just take a gamble. If Beast is your only card draw, you miss the Flaversham in matchups where Beast is bad. You just have to play and just hope they don't have an answer, which if it works out, sometimes just wins you the game.
mm,
But yeah, it's kind of it's inkable. It's nice and flexible. It's there if you kind of miss the Flaversham. So and then of course, yeah, red purple. It's fantastic, and so
mm. There's actually one interesting point here. I've looked over. I just noticed you've got no Pete in the list. Is that a card that a lot of Blue Steel players right now are quite rating? Because you can sometimes in games do what Amber Steel does of just go wide then Pete and say you can't answer this aerial quest win. But you haven't gone Fernie. What's the thought behind that?
yeah. So this is kind of the same. When people ask like why I don't run Let It Go or Zeus last set with no wheel, I just said that everything you have to do has to be like pretty proactive to
Hmm.
putting a clock on your opponent. So like instead of running Let It Go, we run Hades because we're not wheeling, don't have all these cards. We can just double, triple spell this ink. So when we do something, when we play a character, we want it to like be very impactful and like further your game plan of ending the game. And Pete isn't really that. He's great if you like you the few games where you want to just go super wide, so you like go early Flaversham, multiple 2 drops, and then you just like, okay, well, I want to protect my board for a turn from a V prep. He's good then. But if you're just dropping like one thing per turn, sometimes it's awkward to double spell with Pete in no wheel because you don't have a whole lot of ink to spend.
Hmm.
So he's kind of a bad top deck if you don't have the proper arrangement of threats on your board. So like what I imagine would happen a lot of the time that you play Pete in the deck, it's you're maybe protecting like 1 or 2 things, and then it's not enough to, kind of close out the game. Next turn they can just sing their B or play B prep,
Yeah.
and you've essentially kind of like just bought a mediocre turn. Um, and wheel list though, the main benefit I think to wheel list from my experience this set is you do get to run Pete. So you kind of have that hype ramp. I want to be double and triple spelling from mid game to the end of it,
Hmm.
and you can play stuff like Aerial Pete is pretty like almost a checkmate situation. If you're going first, a lot of times that can happen. You can just put aerial Pete and then dime next turn, and it's just guaranteed to win.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't think you have quite the card economy or like the double and triple spelling power that wheel does to say Pete's good in no wheel.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's completely a fair point, and that is something I've tried to mention to people when they play no wheel, because of course it is a different. You do approach it differently. It's not just we've took the wheels out and that's all we've done. And I also said, yeah, you've got to make sure that everything you do is impactful. You want to keep the tempo going, and if they do board wipe, as long as they hard cast it, you can be like, and I react again, and just play another Tamatoa and another whatever. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's a really cool list, and I know a lot of people who watch my channel as well just say they really want to play with no wheel because I did a couple of videos on it, but I wouldn't say I lost faith in the list. I still think it's cool. I seem to at Store Champs I ran it once and it was just a full room of red, blue, and ruby sapphire, a ruby sapphire, ruby amethyst, and it was like, okay, I'm not trained enough for this. But yeah, I think it's awesome, man. Yeah, and it's great to see you sort of doing content again. I saw you on Wonderland's channel as well. You were playtesting with him. So yeah, you coming back
Yep.
at all? Are you doing any streaming soon? Is there anywhere we can announce and tell people?
Uh, I don't know if I would announce anything yet, but I will say that I'm gonna probably try to start doing some Pixelborn Connect, start playing a little bit on stream. I just got a webcam, so we'll see if I can get that set up and get some games in. So I definitely miss streaming. So I hope
Mm.
at least by the end of the season they announce like a client we can be at some point back in the full swing of things.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's. I'm sure a lot of people miss watching you as well. It was always great fun. All right, man. Thank you very much for your time, and yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you
Thanks
very
for having
much.
me.